Hey guys, PTK Collectibles back with another Friday Night TCG Talk, and I am joined by Scowling Fleshbag. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm glad that we managed to get this sorted. I know we tried this before, but technical issues meant that we couldn't do
Yeah.
this. So it's actually worked out better that we can do it now because there's probably a lot more talking points, which is great. So sometimes it works out well like that. So first thing we're going to talk about is the high C spoilers. It is the world
Yes.
premiere right now in Taipei, and
Yes.
we've already seen so much shown already. I didn't realize it didn't start. It started already. I didn't think we are going to see so much so early on. But I woke up this morning to just like 100 messages in Discords,
Yeah.
and seeing the legendaries. Obviously, so we'll talk about the Codex of Frailty reprint in
Yes.
the
Oh, of
legendary
course we
slot.
have to. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the reprints in the legendary slot?
It's hard to say honestly because the product is not that easily available. When we have one example of this, which was High Seas with the Command and Conquer in the legendary slot, right? And the Hunted, of course, and it was much more popular than else thought. So the print numbers were not where the demand was. So I think if we get more boxes into people's hands at this point, it could be okay. I think it did bring down the price a little bit, but not really dramatically. So they clearly seem like they want to continue this. They've done the same thing now with the Codex, again in the legendary slot. So they're going to try this at least for now and see where it goes. And we may have the same issue again, right? So High Seas looks like there may be some issues with getting that into everybody's hands, and then we can't really say what that does to the price because people can't get the product that they want. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all talking about, right? Is can we get the price down? That's the whole point of reprinting it. We'll have to see at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think clearly there's a playbook in mind with reprinting these expensive Majestics in a legendary slot. And I think that's their way to appease players and collectors because
Yeah.
obviously the easiest solution from, perhaps a player standpoint would be, well, why don't you just reprint it in the next set as a Majestic? And
Yeah.
obviously they can do that, that there's no rules to say they can't do that. But as we've seen in the past and how we've seen the game grow and how we've seen dips after Monarch and those kind of stagnated years throughout the Fab 2.0 times, I think it makes sense that they're very much worried that if they overprint or they reprint too much, that they're going to lose, people are going to stop opening boxes, which they had issues with in the past. So
True.
it makes sense. I think if the print run is huge, then I think it makes it a lot easier, right? I think if we're having a conversation where you can go into a store in 8 weeks' time, still buy a box of High Seas for retail on the shelf, then I think it being an L is absolutely fine. But I think, as you just mentioned, if there isn't any availability, it then being a legendary, and also you can't get product, it doesn't really solve the issue. So, how many are they going to be pulled? I mean, I know at the Prague world premiere, quite a lot of the CNCs were reprinted, and some people like the new art, some people prefer the old art. And I remember speaking to people that were worried that they're fabled CNCs. I remember speaking to George, if George is watching right now, he had 23 copies of the fabled CNC, and he was worried that, I mean, if you've got 23 copies of one of the rarest cards in the game, then I don't think a reprint in a non-foil reprint in a different artwork should worry you.
No, I don't think so.
Long term, it's not going to affect it. Really, short term, it didn't affect it either. The only ones were, the Arc ones, but it's such a good card that it's bounced back because it's so powerful.
That's interesting as well, right? When the reprint first came in with the Hunted, the price drop wasn't with History Pack 1. That actually stayed stable. Where it did drop was Arc Unlimited, right? I found that pretty interesting. So, like, why? Because you would think that the cheapest version is the one that actually finds a drop as people go to other versions. But it kind of makes sense from that version dropping because the new art is awesome. It looks really great. If it was the same art, then probably the new version would be cheaper, in my opinion. But the new art is fantastic. Yeah. So a lot of people, there may actually be people who are selling their Arc Unlimited saying, no, actually, I want this one. This one is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that. I think it's kind of like Crusade vibes. And when I saw that card, I remember, I think I was vendoring at Righteous Gaming, so I hadn't seen anything that was happening. I heard that there was going to be a reprint, and I think a lot of people maybe suspected it would, but there was still a lot of people that were like, nah, it's not going to happen. And then when we saw it, and then we obviously saw the extended version, which is, a whole other thing. I think it's definitely a good way to do it if there's enough product. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this new version of, Codex, what will happen with that. There was obviously more reprints announced. We know that Call to the Grave is being reprinted in the Armory deck, which
a lot of people selling a one-off because they bought the playset and they have a pre-order for the Armory deck and they only need 2, right?
yeah, I saw that on the UK Discord. Yeah, I think it's a really great idea. One-off means that it's not. If you put a playset in the deck, I mean, they could put a playset in the deck, but that would then create another issue in itself of people would just be mass buying them just to flip the Call to the Graves. And, the decks themselves probably wouldn't go into players' hands, let's be honest. Especially when these decks, if they're powerful, they sell out quite quickly anyway. I know my LGS, I think, has only got Aurora Armory decks left. That's it. Everything else is sold out.
Yeah, the only other one that my LGS has is Max the Hype Nitro. And that hero just isn't in a good place. And the Armory deck doesn't really have any chase cards that players are looking for at the moment, right? So, but yes, Aurora sadly sitting on the shelf. And they probably have to just put them in storage until Aurora is re-released next year.
Yeah, well, we know it's
hard to move those. Yeah,
it is. I bought a couple of gold foils. I decided to open one, and it was the Starfoil. It was the day after.
Yeah.
That we found the Aurora allowed. So, but they did announce obviously that it's going to come back next year. They mentioned that in the dev talk. So, for those that are big fans, it was a very quick LL, but extremely powerful, and it seems to happen. I think the shift that we've had in the last couple of sets from heavy hitters, Rosetta, Misfail, Hunted, the power has been in the newer heroes. There's been such strength in. I mean, it means that they're making great boxes, and I think a big part of that was LSS realized they make money by selling boxes. So
of course,
and they weren't selling boxes. We had sets like Outsiders that, looking back now, has a plethora of amazing Majestics, but back then it didn't go down well. Bright Lights, again, a lot of those expansion slot cards are really powerful, but when the set came out, a lot of people didn't like it. Dusk Till Dawn as well. So we had a lot of these sets that just didn't really do too well, sales-wise at least, which caused a lot of issues for, Flesh and Blood that we're kind of aware of. So it makes sense that they're making every box. I did think the Hunted was going to be a very dud set because we'd had such powerful sets in a row. So now Hunted was so good, obviously Shelter as well. Going into High Seas, which again looks like another very good set. It does make me wonder if they're going to make a bit of a dud set at some point. Like, they have to, I think, to kind of slow down.
It's something that they talked about a while ago. I think there was an interview that James White gave around the Celebrational in New Zealand, around Heavy Hitters release that was, where he talked about the hype cycle and how they believe not every single set can generate the same amount of hype. And, that is true. And that's one of the reasons why they didn't have the supply of the Hunted that they market demanded, because they just didn't think it was going to be that popular. It's at the end of the day, I get it why they make stronger things, because as you say, you need to sell boxes, and people buy boxes if there's strong things in there. So there's going to be a bit of a power creep that needs to be there, because otherwise, why would you buy it? But it's not only that. People buy things for flavor and art and stuff that they like, and you can't always predict what people are going to like and why they are going to buy it. Power, yes, especially in this game where it's very player driven. It's all about what are the most powerful cards that I can play in my deck so I can bash everybody's head in. Maybe less so for the collector like with other games, but you can't predict, right? And with High Seas, as soon as they revealed the theme for this, I knew this was going to be a slam dunk, right? People love pirates. If you think about the Hunter, like, what's really the overarching theme here? What can people identify with if they don't know Flesh and Blood? It's really hard. But pirates, everybody knows pirates. Everybody loves pirates. Or a lot of people at least do. So
yeah,
I always felt like this set is going to do very, very well.
Yeah, it does look like that. And I remember one of my friends, Peter, who used to run our local armory, he left Flesh and Blood. And I remember him saying, if they ever bring back Necromancer, if they bring in Necromancers, I'll come back to the game. And I think it must have been I think he left just as Mistfell maybe came out, maybe even Rosetta. And he was like, yeah, I'll be out for a couple of years until they bring Necromancer in. And I remember seeing him like, well, you like pirates as well, right? And he was like, yeah, they're doing pirate Necromancers. And he was like, so he's just gone straight back into the game now. He's very in deep. He's bought multiple decks. So I think those kind of themes definitely bring people in. People that I've spoken to that have never been involved in Flesh and Blood, they've seen pirates and they've automatically gone, how do I consume this product? So which I'm going to have some friends come into UK Games Expo, so they get the opportunity to do that. So one of the other things I want to talk about obviously is the events that's been happening. So we've got Comic-Con right now this weekend. UK Games Expo next weekend. So we've got 2 weekends in a row with the Learn to Play booths. And we also had at the Pro Tour in London, it was actually open entry for people to come in and do the Learn to Plays. So in the space of 2 months, we've got 3 Learn to Plays in the UK, which, I think is absolutely fantastic. And you mentioned already earlier that someone had mentioned they'd been to Comic-Con and they'd learnt Flesh and Blood. Do you think that the shift, what do you think of the shift of the last 12 months? Because I critiqued Flesh and Blood and LSS a while back because I didn't think they marketed the game enough. Now it feels like they're very aggressive with their marketing.
They are. I've been going to UK Board Game Expo since 2016, and it's actually where I first encountered Flesh and Blood and where I went down the rabbit hole. So we went there for a few years. I played board games, and at one point I saw a video on YouTube and said, "This is the next trading card game. This is what you need to keep your eyes on." And I've never played trading card games before, and actually to this day I don't know if the video that I watched was in Flesh and Blood or not. But when I walked past the Flesh and Blood stand, which was run by volunteers from the UK community at that point, I was like, oh, that's the game I heard about. I sat down, I played with the IRA starter decks, and I fell in love with the game, and I've been part of this ever since. So I think it's really important, and I really felt like the last years there was no presence from LSS at UK Board Game Expo. They started, I think, about 2 years ago at this point with their own presence. I think this is the second time they have a big Learn to Play area. And I think it really helps. Every time when I go to a con and I walk past these stands, they're buzzing. Like, people are there all the time. They're trying out the game. And I see, like, it brings a lot of people in. I am based in London. And I had multiple people show up to our armory saying, I've played this at a con XYZ for the first time. Now I'm here. I want to experience this game more. I think it's really important to give this visibility. They may be going a bit too hard, maybe, because they're going to very small cons in the UK as well, where the attendance is maybe pretty small and maybe too niche for their product. But I think it's definitely good what they're doing. I think that's the right way to go. I talked to, I believe his name is Trevor, from the team in Europe that does this kind of work, And it's a big cost, right? It's a lot of money to go to these cons, and I don't know if the return on invest is worth it at the end of the day, but I think it's really important. Sorry for that. My dog got excited, but I think we're good. I think it's really important, and this year at UKG they're going all in, right? They basically have the naming rights for the trading cards organized play hall, where all the other games are taking place as well. They're selling the new product as well, so high seas will be available at their stand from Friday, is my understanding. So it's a pre-release weekend, and you can get the boxes. And believe you me, I'm gonna go buy boxes on Friday. That's gonna be my first stop there. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna buy boxes. No, it's great. They're running events all weekend long. Learn to play, drafts, sealed. It's basically one big pre-release celebration on the weekend. It's really well timed. I think it's really important. I think they're doing the right thing, and they should continue doing it. Maybe be a bit more selective about what events they're attending, but I do think it works. Because at the end of the day, I've always felt like if you're trying to get people from other trading card games, it's really hard because of the sunk cost fallacy, right? Somebody that's been in Pokemon or Magic or whatever game for 5, 6, 10 years, and you've sunk tens of thousands of pounds into this hobby. It's really hard to move away from that, even if you even if you don't like it that much anymore. But it's really hard to convince somebody. It's easier to convince somebody to join the game if they have never played a trading card game like myself, or they're coming from board games. I think that's much easier to do than bring in somebody else from another trading card game, especially for a game where there's no known IP behind it. So, yeah, I think it's the right thing to do. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of new players. I also feel like their events this year are selling better. I've been keeping an eye on it because I've been very interested in how well it's selling. There's a ProQuest Plus, and I feel like there's already more people signed up than attended last year, which is a really good sign. And I'll be honest, it's a bit of a hard sell because you have to buy the entry to the UK Board Game Expo, and then you have to pay the entry for the event itself. And the events for Flesh and Blood are not on the cheap side if you're looking at trading card game events at UKG. So I think it's the right thing to do. It's going the right direction. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great event. Last year was my first time going there.
Yeah.
And seeing that it's part of the Misfail release, and I remember seeing that the stand, and I was with a couple of friends that didn't play or collect Flesh and Blood, and even a friend of mine who's a big Pokemon store who's partnered with eBay, he was vendor in there, and I remember him saying, like, that's the card game you keep mentioning about? And I went, yeah, and he was like, everyone's gone past and mentioned how amazing their setup is. And they did have the best
That's
setup
it, right?
there.
Yeah.
People were just kind of, they like shiny lights. So people were just like drifting off to it. And then they're like, oh, what's going on? And they've got people ready. They've got people ready to show them how to play the game, explain everything. They've got products for sale. They've also had PCG grading as well. So that whole sort of, you can play. And I remember chatting to a few people that literally got in that weekend, and it went from them learning to play, buying boxes, pulling a card they really like, and then dropping it off at PCG grading. So it's kind of like they've had the whole journey all in one event. So it was great to see, and I hope they keep doing these because it's really nice to see, as somebody who is involved in other card games, and people got very sick of me pushing Flesh and Blood. And they kind of feel like LSS is paying me to sell it to them, but they're not.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be great. But they're not. It's just, being so passionate about this game, and I've been involved in card games my whole life since I could walk. My backgrounds were Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively. Pokemon I just collected. I've dabbled in other games like Lord of the Rings, Magic the Gathering, but Flesh and Blood always felt just different. There was magic around it, and it just felt right, kind of like it sounds a bit cheesy, but it feels like home. And I think the community itself is so great, and having these people come to these events, join in the community, and I think a lot of them realize that, as you said about the sunk cost fallacy, it's very expensive being involved in card games. You know, Flesh and Blood is not a cheap card game. It's one of the most expensive card games. So if you've been, especially Magic players that have been in the game a long time, they've sunk thousands and thousands into the game. Now that Commander is basically the main format, they've got so many decks. I speak to people and they've got 80 decks. I've never met anybody in Flesh and Blood that has that many decks. Because often or not, they'll have their main, they might have a couple of others that they play around with, but when those heroes rotate out, they sell and buy a new one, or they trade and buy a new one.
Yeah.
Whereas with Magic, you've just got 80 decks, just thousands of thousands just sitting there. So I hope they keep doing it. Yeah, as you said, be selective with the events. Things like Comic-Con and UK Games Expo, I think, are great because they're big events and they're bringing people from outside of card games into it. There's going to be a lot of different different eyes that are going to be going past it. I think what they did at Pro Tour was great. You had the Wargaming event next door, and then you had the Nintendo event.
Yeah.
So, bring basically nerds, just find events that nerds are there and just kind of like push them in. But yeah, it's great to see.
I was very positively surprised at Pro Tour London, actually, how much advertising they did in the XL, where it took place outside of the actual hall with like huge banners and like stickers on tables and walls. And they really thought about this, like, how do we pull people into the hall that are not here for Flesh and Blood, right? You're probably not getting the people at the wedding convention, right? But as you say, like, there's other stuff going on, and I do think we had quite a lot of people walking in, and you could get promos there. You get the starter deck. Yeah, like it's you try it out and you walk away with something, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And just coming back to what you said earlier on as well about the Magic players, it's not only the cost that they put into this, right? If you've played the game for 10 years, that's almost like your identity, right? That's where your friends are. That's where your structure in life is. You go to these events, the game, you have the same lingo with these people, you interact with people who love the same thing, and then kind of getting away from that into a new game where you don't know anybody, and I don't want to be rude to anybody, but we're nerds, right? And nerds are sometimes not the best with social interactions. So if you find your environment where you find yourself comfortable, right, it's really hard to say, no, actually, this is interesting, I'm going to go over there. But then I have to be uncomfortable, right? And that, I think, plays a big part as well when you're thinking about, are we going to get these people or not? And just finally to this topic, in my opinion, it's just, when you boil it down to the basics, it's just a fantastic game, right? The gameplay loop of the game itself is extremely good. The decision making from turn to turn is so good that it can compete with games like One Piece, even though it doesn't have the IP. I've tried, even though I don't have a background in trading card games, I've tried quite a few games since I started playing Flesh and Blood, and they're all fine. They're not bad games, but Flesh and Blood is just a notch above that. Yeah. And I play a lot, and I lose a lot. I lose a lot. But I always say, like, when you lose a game, and the first thing you want to do is just play again, like, that's a fantastic game, right? You can't argue with that.
They've got you. Yeah, they've got you when that happens. I think.
Yeah.
I play One Piece regularly. I play weekly. I run my One Piece locals, and I really enjoy playing One Piece. I'm rubbish at Fab, so I prefer limited. So I like doing sealed events.
Yes,
because it feels like a more of a level playing field, especially at like a world premiere or a pre-release, because it does feel like it's a bit more of a level playing field. So I've got a bit of a chance.
Yeah.
I was a Katsu main. Now Katsu is actually playable again, so I'm probably going to start playing CC again. But I think it's been about a year since I played a full game of CC.
Oh wow! Okay.
It's just been, I played a lot of Blitz. I played a lot of sealed events, like at pre-releases, and obviously Prague, Pro Tour as well, like side events and stuff. So it is definitely the decision making you have. For me, I think that's the reason why I'm not so great at it, is because I can see why, if you're really into playing card games or a game like Fab, why it is the best game to play. It is the premier
Yeah.
game, I think, for in terms of competitiveness. I think everyone that I've spoken to that's come over from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, which were considered both the top two premier card events for competitiveness, they've come to Fab and actually been amazed at how complicated the game is in a good way. The amount of decisions that you have, because you're using the same cards, the decisions you have are infinite, and you really have to think. Whereas in One Piece, I mean, the deck that I play in One Piece is Red Rush Sorrow with animals, so it is literally just I want to take them out in the first 5 turns. So it's autopilot most of the time when I'm playing. With Fab, I have to think, and that's probably why I'm not very good at it. But I still enjoy playing it.
That's why I play Fi, right? It's like you take a hand, you declare no blocks, and then you just play 0-3, go again.
That's why Ninja's fun, because it's just the supreme class. Yeah. You just attack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think to circle back to the kind of availability of boxes earlier.
Yes.
From speaking to people at the Pro Tour that are kind of in inner circles as such, it does very much sound like the projections they did for this year were made last year, and they're clearly under projected and maybe didn't account a percentage in for the events that they were planning to do. So I know that a lot of events have to be planned very far in advance.
Yes.
But I think perhaps the projections they did were done before they had actually set up these events, or they didn't account for a percentage in growth for new players and also returning players as well. Because a lot of people left. Yeah. I know a lot of people that left during Monarch. I know a lot of people that left, Dusk Till Dawn, Bright Lights. But a lot of them have come back to the game now. So I think a lot of people, obviously, I'm seeing a lot of people angry and upset because they can't get hunted. And we're seeing a lot of stuff that happen in America at the moment with the issues with shipping and freights and then tariffs as well. So it looks like US Nats might be a little bit screwed, and some stores are getting 0 boxes, which is absolutely mental. But
yeah, they're just getting the pre-release and basically to run that, but that's it, right? Yeah.
You mentioned a store in London, I think. Yeah. Which I can see why people would be upset. It makes sense naturally. I think when you enjoy the game like Fab, you just want to consume it like wholeheartedly. So when you see a set coming out and you go, right, I really like Pirates, even as somebody that isn't focused on the most competitive aspects of the game, if you're just wanting to consume the product at a semi-casual level and you can't get it, then I understand, coming from Pokemon as well, where you just can't get anything, which is like the way I hope Fab doesn't get to. And I don't think it will, because I think LSS are just a bit more savvy with that stuff, and the game doesn't have the IP that Pokemon does. So I think the ups and downs are very much mediated by the fact that it isn't a huge IP. But I think moving forward, it will make sense. We're going to get a lot more printing. But the only thing I worry about is, because of these treasure packs, is they're not going to reprint this set. So it is going to be, in 6 weeks' time, there'll be no product on shelves. That's what worries me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, in theory, they could reprint a second print run and say, listen, there's no treasure packs in them.
Yeah.
But the problem then again is, right, you and myself, we're very deep in the hobby, right? We're basically talking and thinking about this every single day. But that somebody that is more casual into it, maybe they've gone in Monarch and they're coming back, they may not necessarily know that they're buying a second edition, which doesn't have these treasure packs, and they open it up expecting a treasure pack, and there's none there, and then that's a bad experience as well.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, I do think it's better to print a second edition, let's say without a treasure pack, maybe with some other incentive, maybe just a box topper, something, than not have the product available. But it's a notoriously hard business to project numbers, what are you going to sell, what the demand is going to be, and you don't want to have Everfest numbers where basically years later you can still buy it way under what they sell them in stores at the start. I love opening Everfest, but it's probably not where you want to be. So it's hard. Hopefully they'll take the right lessons moving forward and see what happens. But it's an interesting topic as well. You just mentioned it. So we have US Nationals, I think, is coming up quite quickly now in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you think there's in a world where they sense in a few days that there's not going to be the product in the country that they need, that they should make the set illegal for the constructed part?
I think I've seen it happen with One Piece. I
Oh, yeah?
remember a regionals. I remember it was. OP-005, I want to say, and it was when not long after the One Piece live action series came out. So One Piece, the card games blew up. Everything went mental.
Mm.
There was no product on shelves, and product got delayed in Europe. And so the conversation was basically back and forth with the team that was organizing the event and Bandai, because the product was released in Europe but not in the UK. So we had to wait a week, which meant that the players in the Europe already got the product, building their decks ready, and the UK players are like, well, we're not going to go to the event then because we're going to get trashed.
Yeah.
Because they're using the next meta, whereas we can't. And it was back and forth, and I remember hearing conversations because the Bandai store in London actually got some amount of product.
Yeah.
But there was a whole other thing where there was conversations being had in a private WhatsApp group by employees saying they were going to sell to the players at a really high price because they know that they need the cards. And then they just went, look, we're just going to make the cards illegal. The format's the same. You can't use the next set, which makes sense. I think that's the fairest way to do it. If there's not enough product, I would say so. It's going to piss somebody off, right? Either way, some people are going to be happy, some people aren't. But I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair that if there's players coming from smaller stores, for instance, or smaller locations, because the US is huge, if they're coming from areas where their LGS might get 4 to 6 at an armory, so that store's only got like 4, like a case, so they haven't got the singles, then you've got the single sellers like MinMax, Righteous Gaming, and a couple of others who now have complete control of the market, could potentially raise prices, and it just makes the whole experience quite sour for players.
Yeah.
So they might do. I don't think they will personally. I think they'll make it. I think they'll make it available. I think LSS obviously are having a lot of conversations right now. Maybe what we've heard has been kind of exaggerated. I know MinMax made a video on it, I believe, and they actually talked about kind of the issues that's been happening. So I don't know. It would be unprecedented. I don't think they've ever done that in Flesh and Blood. I know they had issues with an event before. I can't remember what set it was, where people just had to buy from the vendors at the event because they're LGSs. So, I'm glad I'm not competitive in this game because it's not something I have to worry about. I know if I was good at this game and competitive and playing in an event like US Nat, I would be worried. It would definitely make me stressed knowing that there's a chance that I can't get the cards that I want to build the deck that I want, that I planned for. So, it's
hard, right? Because there's going to be some players who have a big support system where they have a big team, and they just pull their cards. Everybody goes to a pro release, and they just decide, what, you are the best. You are the person with the best chance to actually take this home. So we're just gonna give you all our cards, and maybe they're supported by a big LGS that does singles as well, and they're supplying the cards because they can. They can open the boxes before release date, I believe, as long as they only sell them on the release day. They can actually open them before, right? So they know what they have. So it's hard because somebody like that then would have an advantage, but at the end of the day, it's like, how many of those players do you really have, right? It's
going to be
hard.
Mostly,
yeah, exactly.
So stores can sell for pre-release now, so it essentially just makes pre-release the actual event now, because stores can sell it at pre-release. Sets like High Seas, they're going to sell everything at pre-release if they've got their full supply and product. I mean, I know in the UK at least anyway, Asmodee are crap. Then they've got Bliss as well. Which
so I hear,
and they've got Heyo.
Yeah.
Blackfire in Europe. So it it could make it complicated, I think. But I
Yeah.
have faith that things will be corrected in the future. I know the next set we've got is the Guardian Mastery Pack. So I
Yes, in
don't
August. Yeah.
think the demand is going to be like. I mean, I might be wrong, but it's not going to be anywhere near the levels of the last couple of sets. So do you think it could be?
No, I don't think so, because it's a class-specific set, right? And the amount of people that are interested in playing Guardian is limited.
Yeah.
Now, they are releasing it at the same time as Smash Palace, which is their new multiplayer box or game in a box product. But again, I also think that is going to be a niche audience there. We haven't really seen what's in that set yet, except for a few cards. But I do think the demand is going to be a lot lower, and it's also not going to coincide with a big event that is right there and then. At least I'm not aware. Like US Nats being like on the weekend that's one of the biggest events of the year, right?
Yeah.
So that makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Smash Palace looks pretty cool. I think it's definitely a toned down version from what I've seen of the art. It feels a bit less gory. I think that definitely appeals to a bit more of a wider market than Fab does. I think it's still a niche in itself. Everyone that I've spoken to has kind of, they've maybe not picked that up, but it might not be for those that are playing Fab right now. It might be for people that want to sit down at a kitchen table and just play with friends, which round the table tried. We've had other products in the past. It's getting closer to the PvE that people have demanded for years.
Don't give me hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. I think from what I heard, they said that they've kind of put that to the side now. They're not necessarily actively working on it right now. I think
that makes sense, right? Focus on the thing that you do well, and focus on your core product, and then when you get headspace or you grow to size where you can put resources aside to really focus on it, then yes. But otherwise, focus on your main game.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen in terms of like products, we've seen this growth, right? So we've got Armory decks, which people were asking for a ready-to-play classic constructed product for years. And it always felt like, why wasn't that a product introduced at the start? I think, for me, a lot of people they obviously tried Blitz and they pushed the Blitz decks, and maybe they pushed them longer than they probably should have. I think it just got to a point where, these sets were getting Blitz decks and people were like, I don't care. Like, I don't want that product. We had the classic battles. It sounded great, but it didn't. The execution of it wasn't amazing. Round the table, another product again. Now we've got these first strike decks that a lot of people are getting into. That's how they get into the game. We've got a new Bravo welcome deck that's coming out soon as well, which is quite interesting. I'm surprised they did another welcome deck. But Ira's bland in Blitz, so still using those, and I reckon they've got millions of those Ira decks printed.
Yeah, I mean, considering they're giving them out and they're saying it's free and they keep pushing it, they've got to have a lot. Yeah,
which is fine because you can still learn to play. Like, it's not limited to just one avenue of learning to play the game. You can still do that. It worked for so many of us. But the Armory decks, and then we've obviously had the Jarl Armory deck, which was a step up because it had extra Majestics and Legendary.
Yeah.
What do you think is a product you would like to see Flesh and Blood add that maybe other card games do that haven't been done already?
I do think like a 2-player set like they did with Classic Battles is something that we should have. And they tried it. I think it was like one of their first products that wasn't like their main core sets. And I liked a lot about that. Like I liked the little booklets. I liked the decks. They were actually really well balanced into each other. There's also like this story between these two heroes, Dorinthia and Reinar. I love the art. They just didn't quite execute it as well as they should have. It was also a bit too expensive for it was. And to this day, the argument there's cards in there you can't get anywhere else, but they are really important for Dorinthia. And then you put it into not like an armory deck that is specific to that hero, but actually like a 2-player set where you probably only want one piece of the set anyway. So I would like to see something like that again, just with all their learnings from the last few years, and just incorporate that into that new product. I think that could actually be pretty good, and that's something I would like to see.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you follow. There's a couple of guys called Team APS. They do a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh content in America. They're very, very well known. They do what they do in terms of content is very good. It's very like user friendly, getting people into Yu-Gi-Oh. But they did a video recently, I think it was last month, and they picked up the, learn to play product, 2-player starter product of every TCG. So they've obviously picked that up. Now the problem with that is the rulebook isn't inside the deck. There's a little rulebook, but you have to scan and go on the website, which they did. Unfortunately, the videos on YouTube have been pulled because they're trying to push the first strike stuff. And when you go onto the link on the website, it doesn't show that product on the website anymore. It just goes straight to the first strike stuff. So this was a conversation that I had recently with another person in Fab. But that's one of the things that gripes me a little bit is they could have just left it on the website and said, right, how have you entered this game? And then had the list, the drop-down list. Was it the Ira deck? Was it the first strike? Or was it classic battles or other? And then it can still go through those. They probably should have put a rulebook in the box anyway. Honestly, I don't know why. I think they thought the world's moving, but the whole game is about playing it in the flesh and blood. So that was a strange move for me to not put a rulebook in the game. I get they were trying to push the content. People can just watch a video, right? But they pulled the video, so
if you put like a QR code or a link to something online in a product that is out there, you kind of need to keep that up there, right? What you can do is say, hey, this is not the newest version. If you'd like to see like the 2025 version of the rules that have evolved quite a bit, here's the link to go to there. But just yanking it away, it's just like it's not the way to go. It's just like, because people will see these random boxes on a shelf and be like, oh, what's that? Buy it, and then that's an immediate bad experience. And at the end of the day, it's all about first impressions. It's so important. If that first impression doesn't work out, then they may be gone forever.
Yeah, that's it. I think people's attention span as well is very small. We got this TikTok brain rot generation. People are you've got to get them in easily, very quickly. So they might have tried that product and gone, oh no, not for me. And putting that glistening steel blade being exclusively to that. I remember when it came out, because I think retail was $39.99, which is a lot of money for what you get.
Yeah.
It could have easily been $19.99. And I don't think anyone would have had any issues. But putting a card that has still not been reprinted and it's only ever been in there is very strange. It's one of the few Majestics that have never been reprinted, if you count Unlimited as a reprint as such. So it might be a card that they reprint in the future, but still, I've picked a lot of those decks up over the years just to break down for the Glisten Steel Blade and one of the equipments that comes in Rainbow Foil. I think it's the chest. It's like a couple of quid on Card Market, but I think it's the only way you get the foil in it. So it was a strange move. A 2-player starter set, a new one would be good. I think, as you said, if they learned from everything they've done over the last couple of years, you could have a more complete package. Maybe have it as a lost runner. So a product that is going to you're not going to make any money of it, but it is an investment into the future, into bringing people in. Same as these expos and these learn to play events. You're not going to make money out of these. It's short term, that initial investment up front is quite a lot. But long term, it's going to pay you back with the people that have entered the game. They're going to buy the product, play the game, travel the world, and, then just become degens like the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly, right? So they could even make a product that makes a loss for them, right? On every individual unit printed or produced. But, they'll make it up by people buying boxes afterwards, right? Where I mean, I don't know the logistics or the math behind that, but I'm guessing there's quite a good margin on a box.
Yeah.
And if you get them, if you give them that good at first experience and you get them into your ecosystem, there's a lot of people say buy singles, right? But at the end of the day, we all love opening boxes. We love opening stuff.
Yeah.
We like trying to get that card, that chase card. Don't remember what last time I opened something good, but that doesn't stop me trying.
It's like crack. It is very addictive opening product. The advice should always be buy the singles. It's a lot cheaper, but there's no fun in that, really. Let's be honest. Opening boxes is so exciting.
How are you gonna get those treasure packs, right? If you don't open a box, like
that changes the whole EV of this set. I've spoken. I've had people message me and reach out. How much you buy in treasure packs for? I haven't set a price. I don't know. Honestly, I think from my point of view, obviously, I'm going to open them. It helps that I'm a single seller as well, so it works out that way. But I think for the most part, the smartest idea would be maybe if you've happen to get more than one case, that might be rare now. But if you happen to, maybe open a couple of treasure packs, and then you could then sell them on, which brings down the cost of those boxes. So say you spent £340 on a case, for instance. You probably can sell those packs for at least 20 quid each. Market I think will set around 20 to 30 pounds, just because I think the UK at least anyway. There's probably not going to be enough people that are going to be buying them up. I know in the US, a couple of people I've spoken to said they're doing one to buys at like $40. So, but you get 4 of those. Say it is £25. That's £100 box off, 100 quid back from your case.
It's 1/3 pay or 1/4 pay for, right? So
So even if you don't get the big hits, then you're going to feel a little bit worse, a little bit better now. You pay £240 for a case of Flesh and Blood, especially the most recent set.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, good for the people who can sell them. I won't, because I'm going to open them. But
I'm opening.
I'm not going to be able to resist. But I mean, if you're trying to just have the experience of opening the product, chasing the cards that you need for your heroes, as we said earlier on, people are invested in their hero and their classes, and they don't really care about the other stuff. That's an easy way of making sure that you probably are going to come out even on this, maybe even make a bit of profit, depending on if you open up a Marvel or a Legendary you don't want. Should be good. And I'm very keen to see where it lands. Could be 20 to 30, where you say, but it may also depend a little bit on how fast people open up those hand signed cards from James White.
Yes.
If they go fast and people see, there's a smaller and smaller chance of opening those, then the price probably drops a little bit. But if they are not found quickly, then people are going to be chasing those, right?
Have you seen one's already been pulled?
Yeah, Shiana,
yeah.
Yeah.
And they got the photo of James White as well. That's just, it's magic.
But
it's a fairy tale, I think.
I think at the world premiere, every single player that participated got one pack right off the box, right? They just got there. So that's 600 packs just being opened right away. They opened up on stream. They're going to be opening so many packs over this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if you see another 2 or 3 over the course of the world premiere weekend in Taipei this weekend.
I'm excited.
Don't be surprised.
I have a list, because Crucible of War is my favourite set. So Shiana was on the list. The Twinning Blade.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Tunic, Mask of Momentum. I've already seen a want to buy from Matt at Tech Locore for $5,000. It's madness. I think it's one of those, if you pull one of these amazingly rare cards, for whatever it is. I mean, if it's a legendary, it's going to be thousands. If it's a fabled, it could be even more. If you pull one of those and someone offers you $5,000 on the spot, are you holding or are you selling?
I'm selling.
Yeah.
For $5,000, I'm selling. Yeah.
I think that's fair. This is the conversation I had with people when it got announced. It was, are you going to keep the hits? And every single person was like, no, I'm selling them, because I know someone will pay. It's a one of one. Even like from quite a few of the collectors that I've spoken to, they actually would value signed eye, for instance, less than a normal eye, because it's so unique having to find somebody that wants that James White signed eye, knowing that actually he has signed cards in the past. I know he won't sell he won't sign any of those first few sets anymore now because of this. But it's a niche within a niche, right? So for me, it would be quite sentimental. If it was if it was an extended art Twinning Blade and that was signed by him, I think I'd want to keep it. But if it was something from like Arc, I would sell it. I have no attachment to that set, honestly. If it was a Tunic, I probably would keep it. I think that'd be that or the mask. But just because I just love shiny cardboard crack. But
no, I mean it's
hard.
I get it, right? If I get like a special version of Scalding Flashback, for instance, right? I have to think really hard about selling it. But for me, again, this is the only trading card game I'm invested in. It's the first one. I'm not planning to start in any others, and I dread to think how much money is sitting in my folder, right? And how much money is just there. And so if I get a big pull like this, I'd probably sell it, unless it's like really something that I love. Like Reinar was like the hero I played for my first 2-3 years. Just played almost exclusively Reinar. So if I get like a Reinar card, maybe a Reinar Marvel, then I'd have to think very hard about that. But otherwise, I'd probably sell it. At the end of the day, it's a game, and I love it, and I believe in LSS, and I believe in the game, and I think this game has a great future right now. But also, it's a very volatile market, and I don't think I would be comfortable holding a card that I know right now I could get £5,000 for it, and maybe in 10 years I could get 15,000. But that's just like too much money to just sit there for now, and I'd definitely try and shift something like that. I'm still chasing DDT cards, right? I'm still opening Dusk Till Dawn because I'm hoping I'm going to get a hands drawn eventually.
Oh, yeah, you do not see them. I remember I had someone a couple of months ago from Spain reach out, and they'd pulled one of the prisms. Well, it was their friend actually, but their friend doesn't have social media, so I was back and forth with them. I was willing to help middleman it, kind of mediate a deal. I wasn't interested in myself, but I was like, look, I can connect you with people that would be. But I think in the end they kept it just because it was so special. I think those art sketches are very niche, I think, but it also extremely unique. It was the first time we ever got anything serialized in the game.
Yes.
I think moving forward, at some point, I think they will do serialized like normal cards. I don't think it will happen anytime soon. I think it will happen at one point. As long as they do it where there's a non-serialized version that does the same thing. Maybe it has different artwork, but still does the same thing. So it doesn't affect the playability of the game. It's purely just for collectors that like to spend money on expensive cards. Then fair enough. But I think LSS do things quite tastefully. I think the goal isn't to screw people over here. That's why it was always about that short-term growth rather than that short-term organic growth rather than just exploding, right? That's why they didn't go balls deep early on with doing hundreds of events around the world, because they didn't want the game to be like other TCGs. They want it to feel personal still. That's why James White still goes to events. He was at Pro Tour London. No other card game at this level anyway has that personal touch, which is why I think it's the most special game. So how did you get into making content for Flesh and Blood?
So I decided that I wanted to make a real go at trying to qualify for Pro Tour. So I'm at best mediocre at the game. I was like, you know what? For one season, I'm really going to try. ProQuest season, going to go all in and see if I can qualify for Pro Tour. And at that point, when I made the decision, I started to think about, well, what could I do to get better at the game in one go? And one of the things that I saw, or rather listened to in a podcast, was the advice of play every single hero 10 times. Right? So you know what they do, you know what to look out for, You know what to expect when you're playing against them. You know how they play, and then you, no matter which hero you play, it gets much easier for you to play into those heroes because you know what their patterns are. And before that, you know, some heroes I just had no idea. They basically did something. I looked at the cards, like, okay, sure, yeah. And I didn't challenge people either. It's like, yeah, you do that, yeah, okay, fine. And then, you know, playing 10 times every single hero with somebody that has a collection like me that is very focused on a couple of classes, like, it's not realistic that I do that in paper. Like, A, I don't have the cards, and B, doing that in paper is going to take a lot of time. So, while I don't love playing on Talishar, that was the obvious solution. I'm going to play it digitally. That'll let me get 3-4 games in per day and get through that in a decent amount of time. And I thought, well, if I do that, I may as well stream it. Right? I'm going to sit in front of my laptop doing that for 3-4 hours. Why not stream it? And that's how I got into it. And magically, some people found that interesting to watch. And now I've been streaming for 1.5 years at this point. And it's been an awesome journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Stream on Talishar. I know a lot of people really enjoy watching the gameplay of Fab. I think as someone who is primarily not a player of the game, for me it's kind of like some sports that I enjoy doing it, but watching it I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
So when I'm at events and people crowd around their TVs and they're watching gameplay, I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go grab a coffee. Because it's not my thing. I played a lot of Talishar early on.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great tool. I think having that definitely probably saved Flesh and Blood, especially through the COVID years where nobody could play in person. But kind of Sims themselves, I think, are not the greatest replacements. As you said, you'd prefer to play in person. It's so much better.
Yeah.
I think you do your own triggers. There's nothing automatic. There's also that face-to-face, right, with people. I think the social side of the card games is what I enjoy the most, is
100%.
going to these events, meeting people, even if they don't want to talk sometimes. I've sat down and I've said how your day is, and they've just looked at me and went, I'm here to play. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. You're in the zone, I get it. So what's for you making content moving forward? Have you got any goals or plans that you want to achieve? Is there anything that you haven't done yet that you kind of, want to do?
So there's a few things, right? And at the moment, I'm kind of at a crossroads where I want to decide what I want to do moving forward. I've done some YouTube content, some scripted videos, while streaming is my main gig, and I'm always thinking about, well, what do I want to do? Is doing both feasible? Is it sensible? Because do I have enough time to invest the time that it needs into both aspects? And the answer really is no. It's like I work full time, and I have other stuff going on. Like, just creating content takes a lot of time. I love it, but it takes a lot of time. And streaming 3 times a week and creating scripted content at the same time is really difficult. So the question then is, like, do I want to do both? Do I want to just focus on one area, or what do I do? And that's kind of where I am at the moment. I haven't made a decision because I love both. So I don't know. When I'm doing my content, I always try to think about what doesn't exist already. So what can I do what other people aren't doing yet? Now, there's usually a reason why people do it, because it works, right? And at the end of the day, you do want people to see what you make, so you will create more of that content. And what works a lot in Flesh and Blood is, on one side, new player content, and on the other side, it's content for serious players, right? For players that want to be really good at the game. So deck techs and pro players explaining their plays and that kind of stuff. So some Talishar stuff, but very specific on explaining how things work. And I'm always thinking about, well, what else is there out there that hasn't been done yet, or isn't being done? And that's really what I try to do with every single piece of content. So also when I stream, I know that I'm not the best player in the world, right? If you want to watch a pro play the game, it's not the stream for you. I thank you for visiting, but if you're trying to take a lot of learnings away on how to improve the game, it's probably not me. So I try to be more educational for new players and to explain, okay, the basics and be very welcoming. I'm very lucky that I have a small but very friendly community of players who just want to help other people. So if somebody comes in and asks a question in chat, there's like 5-6 people that will jump on top of them and be like, oh, you can do this or you can do that, or this is a product you can buy, or this you can look up this information. I would recommend this hero, or he played this card because he made that mistake, etc. So and I really like that, and I do think that is what I want to continue fostering. But especially when it comes to streaming as well, what I'm always thinking is, how can I make it more interesting to watch? Because watching Talishar is, some people like it, some don't. But because it's a fan-made tool, it's not flashy, right? It's not Hearthstone, right? It's not like animations and sounds and all that. It's basic, it's great. I love it. But to watch, I think a bit more oomph would help. So I'm always thinking about, how can I change the viewing experience to make it more entertaining to watch, and that's kind of what I'm always thinking about, especially when it comes to the streaming part.
Yeah, I agree. I think making content, you're obviously constantly trying to think about what I can do differently. How can I engage people? And engage with people is obviously the name of the game. It's the most important.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of in the last 12 months, a lot of new Flesh and Blood content creators come in.
Yeah,
you can tell that the game's growing because people are very passionate about the game. So where it is those pro player interviews, those going through plays, there's deck techs that learn to plays, box openings, market discussions, whatever it is. There is a plethora of content now compared to 2 years ago, and a lot of the content creators that were around 2 years ago aren't around anymore. So I think the passing of the torch as such really does happen quite a lot in these kind of spaces. But whatever you do, I'm sure that you'll put a lot of time and effort into it, and I think that community side of it is probably the best part of it. I think that's quite special, having your own community and knowing that if you are streaming and you're busy playing and people got questions, that you've got people in there that are going to help people that are coming in, which is all we can really ask for, honestly, I think.
Exactly, right. And when I stream, I lose a lot, right? I had a stream last Monday where I didn't win a single game. I lost 7 games in a row. I didn't win a single game. But I think a lot of that is also because I try to engage with the viewers as well, right? So I don't focus as much on the game as I should to catch those small mistakes. But I find it more valuable to me and people who watch me to actually have a conversation and to talk about what's happening in the world of Flesh and Blood than playing the best game that I can. That's important for me. I think for other streamers that's different, but I feel like if you are streaming a Talishar game and you're just sitting there silent, focusing on your game, then why are you streaming, right? So, because what are you trying to do? But I'm some people love watching that because they love seeing how a pro makes those decisions, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just feel like it's not what I want to do. And yeah, it is a lot of time. It's we're in a niche, as you mentioned earlier on, and you're not going to make any money of this, right? It's a hobby, right? Maybe you get some donations here and there, but then if the day it all goes back into creating the content, right? It's not, nobody that creates content in Flesh and Blood, I would say, can live of it. Like, there's nobody that makes enough money with that can live of it, and I think it'll be many years before that would happen. So it's a passion thing, and eventually you'll have to ask yourself, well, is it worth all that effort that I'm putting in? And if it's a hobby, then yes, it is. But sometimes it's like, listen, it's taken so much time. Like, do I really still want to be doing this? So that passing that torch will happen. You said there's a lot of different content. I agree, but I think there's still a lot of room for new people wanting to come in. I think there's a lot of things that are not being done yet, and I think there's a lot of things that are not being done well. Right. So if you come in and there's a lot of opportunity for somebody to just up the production value.
Yeah.
What I really like about Flesh and Blood content is like the professional production by Savage Feasts for the premiere events. Like these guys are just at the top of their game. And I notice it every now and then when I tune into a different TCG. Like I randomly switch into a regional for Star Wars Unlimited a few weeks ago, and like it's just like night and day. Like it's almost unwatchable what other TCGs do. So and LSS and Savage Feats and the whole team behind it, they just keep pushing the envelope. I think that's the term.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you probably saw it, right? The video that they did to promote the game with Pablo Pintor and some other famous players. That was so good. But I keep thinking, it's like, this would have been so easy to mess up, right? This could have been just pure cringe, right? You'd sit like, oh my god, what is this? And somehow they managed to make that video not.
They made it hard.
Cringe.
Everyone was
like, yes,
that, going, yeah, let's go. Yeah.
So that's so hard to do, like especially the kind of video that they made. It's like that was amazing. So yeah, I think the content is getting better from fans and LSS both, but there's still a lot that people can do, especially on the casual side. I'll actually be very interested to see when Project Blue, when that goes public properly, like what people do with that kind of content. There could be another push, especially for players like you who are not that involved in the competitive side. So we'll see. And if somebody's thinking about creating content, all I can say is do it. Right? It's like just do it.
Give it a try. You don't know until you try at the end of the day. So
exactly. Yeah.
You might as well. So I always like to end these things out on a hot take, and it puts people on the spot. So, what is your hot take right now about Flesh and Blood?
My hot take is that people complain about fatigue metas way too fast. Right? I feel Flesh and Blood, a lot of the metas we've had, there's like a premier aggro deck, and then the rest of the meta revolves around how do we tackle that aggro deck, right? You think about Aurora that just went by, and there's an argument that she wasn't best hero, she was just very popular, and that's why she got all those living legend points so fast. But then, we had Zen where we need a card band, etc., etc. It's like, it's always the meta usually, especially at the start of the set, there's like this one aggro deck, and people need to counter it. And people don't adjust well when everything slows down. People immediately start complaining. It's like, no, it's like Trundle decks and it's boring. And it's like, oh, you're just blocking. How am I supposed to win against that? And count your blessings. How am I supposed to counter that? And it's like, yeah, but you're complaining. We haven't even really entered that meta yet, and you're already complaining. Like, let's see what happens. Let's do it, right? Because I feel like that's my hot take. It's like, let's have a fatigue meta and see what people do with it, because there's ways to counter that. And of course, I'm completely unbiased, and I'm not saying that because Reiner would actually be good in a meta like that. so completely unbiased, right? Because Dex blocking is what Reiner loves. Like, yes, please, if you want to block, awesome. I'll intimidate your cards and I'll win. But no, I really think the game is revolving too much around the aggro decks, and I'd love to see actually a defensive meta play out, and people have to deal with not going to time, and how do I set up big turns where it goes over that blocking? How do I cancel out that live game? Because there's tools for that. People just don't seem to want to do that, and so we go from one aggro meta to the next. That's my hot take.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for giving me the time to sit down and have this conversation. I'll put a link in the description below, obviously, to your socials. Check them out. It's always great to support other content creators in the space, and we both do very different content as well. Yeah. So I think that's nice. And thank you as always. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and have a great day.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.